Some crimes are so disturbing that people forget the ages involved. In this video, we're looking at cases where children committed crimes so brutal that judges handed down sentences that would lock them away for decades, sometimes for life. These are 20 kids whose actions were so shocking that the courtroom went silent the moment the verdict was read. Lionel Tate. Lionel's story is a distressing one. At just 13 years old, Lionel became the youngest life-term prisoner in the United States history. In 2001, Lionel unalived his 6-year-old cousin when he practiced wrestling moves on her. Lionel's mother was tasked with looking after him and the child, but left the children in the basement to watch television while she went upstairs. A few minutes later, Lionel came upstairs, panicking, saying that Tiffany Unick was not breathing anymore. She was rushed to the hospital, where the doctors could not believe the extent of her injuries. According to the prosecution, the injuries were so severe that it seemed like she had been rammed repeatedly by a car. The defense claimed it was play fighting gone wrong, but the judge sided with the prosecution, believing Lionel knew exactly what he was doing. What was surprising about this case was that after the judge handed a life sentence, the prosecution then worked with the defense to get Lionel a lighter sentence. Eventually, after much protest, Lionel was released, only to be arrested again in 2005, while still a minor, for violating his parole. Lionel had threatened a pizza delivery rider with a gun and was arrested yet again. This time, the judge recognized that he was a threat and sentenced him to 30 years in prison. To this day, Lionel's locked up. Amarjeet Sada. Police believe that Amarjeet had already unalived 3 infants by the time he was apprehended in 2007. The kicker? He was only 8 years old. Amarjeet was born and raised in Begusarai district, Bihar, an underdeveloped area in rural India. In 2007, the 8-year-old was investigated after neighbors suspected that he had something to do with the disappearance of their 6-month-old infant daughter. During questioning, relatives revealed that this was not the first time that Amarjeet was suspected of unaliving someone. He had previously caused the unaliving of his 6-month-old cousin and was believed to have something to do with another infant's disappearance as well. However, believing he was just a kid who did not know any better, everyone chose to stay quiet. This changed when the neighbor's daughter went missing. During questioning, Amarjeet calmly revealed how he had unalived the baby and where he had left the body. Sure enough, her body was recovered from exactly where Amarjeet led them. This verified his status as the youngest serial unaliver in history. Mackenzie Shriller. Mackenzie was a popular student at Strongsville High School in Ohio. She was well-liked and even had a large social media presence. At just 17 years old, it seemed like Mackenzie had cracked the social code. She was even dating 20-year-old Dominic Russo, her boyfriend for the past 4 years as of 2022. However, their relationship had gotten volatile from 2021 onwards, with several people convincing Dominic to leave Mackenzie. There had been at least one case where, when Dominic tried to break up with Mackenzie, she threatened to run him over with his vehicle. Then, on July 31st, Mackenzie, Dominic, and their friend Davian were found unconscious after their vehicle had hit the side of a brick wall early in the morning. All 3 of them had gone partying, and there were some illegal substances in the vehicle. However, the bigger picture was that Dominic and Davion had passed away, and Mackenzie only had a slim chance of making it. She beat all odds, went through several surgeries, and managed to survive. Reportedly, she was in hysterics when she learned Dominic and Davion did not make it. Still, friends and family members of the victims believed something was off about her behavior. She went back to posting as normal just a few days after her friends had passed, even hinted to committing the crime. This reopened the investigation, and police found that Mackenzie had scouted the area before the crash and that her foot was pressed up against the accelerator when the vehicle was found. Plus, the vehicle's brakes were fully functioning. Mackenzie could have stopped if she wanted to, but that was not part of the plan. In the end, the judge saw through the fake tears and agreed with the prosecution. Mackenzie was sentenced to a life behind bars. Mary Bell. 2 young boys, Martin Brown and Brian Howe, were found unalived just weeks apart in 1968. Mary Bell from Newcastle upon Tyne became the prime suspect. Martin was found unalived in an abandoned building, in what investigators originally assumed was an accidental passing. Mary attended his funeral and showed an unusual curiosity about his passing. Weeks later, Brian's body was recovered from the train tracks near where he lived. This time, it was clear the boy had been unalived by someone else. He even had the unaliver's initials carved on his flesh. According to witnesses, Mary was last seen with Brian by the railway. While she initially denied the crime, she later confessed, admitting that she had been fascinated with the idea of ending someone's life for a long time. At the time of her crimes, Mary was only 11 years old. Her defense team pointed out that she was only a child who had grown up in a horrible home. Her crimes were a cry for help, but the prosecution asked the judge not to undermine the severity of what Mary had done. The judge sided with the prosecution and agreed that Mary needed to be locked up for her good as well as everyone's good, too. Alyssa Bustamante. After unaliving 9-year-old Elizabeth Alton, Alyssa went on with her day, as if nothing had happened. She had lured the child to the woods near their home in Missouri, repeatedly stabbed her, and then buried her body in a shallow grave. Alyssa had picked Elizabeth at random. Her goal was simply to unalive someone. Friends and family members had grown concerned over Alyssa's behavior in the days leading up to her crime, but believed she was just a 15-year-old acting up because of problems at home. However, investigators later uncovered her internet history and went through her journals where the truth was discovered. Alyssa had written about the crime, saying that she felt alive after it and was fully ready to commit more crimes. Her defense pointed out her age and mental health, but the prosecution claimed it was premeditated. The jury deliberated the facts of the case and eventually returned with a guilty verdict. Even at Alyssa's age, she had just carried out a crime so brutal that it required strict punishment. Alyssa's currently serving out a life sentence and has been denied parole several times. George Stinney. A lot of things went wrong in George Stinney's case. The 14-year-old was accused of unaliving 2 white girls, an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old, in South Carolina. When police apprehended him, they did not conduct a thorough investigation. Instead, they relied on what the townspeople had told them. Their bias pointed them toward George, who was nowhere near the crime scene and had witnesses to support his whereabouts. But that did not matter for police, and they promptly arrested him. His trial started and wrapped up within 24 hours with a guilty verdict, and George was sentenced to capital punishment. The trial was controversial even at the time in 1944, but it was later revisited in 2004. Not only was George's conviction falsified by the investigating officer, but his counsel and parents were not allowed to be with him in the interrogation room. His parents even had to move from the area because of protests surrounding the crimes George had allegedly committed. His counsel did not call any witnesses, did not challenge the state's witnesses, and overall did nothing to adequately represent his client. The case lasted 2 hours, and deliberation lasted for just 10 minutes. George was wrongfully convicted and sentenced to unaliving by electrocution at the age of 14. Evan Miller. In 2003, at 14 years old, Evan Miller beat his neighbor, Cole Cannon, with a bat and then burned down his trailer home with him in it. Cole was Evan's mother's dealer, and the night before the unaliving, he had invited Evan and another of his friends to the trailer, where they drank and did substances together. Sometime later in the night, Cole woke up to find Evan and his friend stealing from his wallet. He was then attacked with the baseball bat, with Evan reportedly saying, "I am God now," before delivering the fatal blow. The court argued that Evan had carried out the gruesome crime because of his mental health challenges and problems growing up at home. The prosecution sympathized with his age, just 14 at the time of the unaliving, but argued that he was conscious of his decision that day. The judge and jury both agreed that Evan should be held responsible for the crime, and he was tried as an adult. Ultimately, for Cole's unaliving, Evan was sentenced to a life behind bars. Interestingly, the case was later reviewed, with many claiming that the laws surrounding juvenile offenders should be changed. They noted the circumstances surrounding Evan's crimes and believed it was worth another case. To this day, Evan and his attorneys are working to get him out. Melinda Loveless. A horrific crime shocked the country in 1992. 12-year-old Shanda Sharer was found badly beaten and unalived in Madison, Indiana. Her unalivers? 4 teenage girls. The mastermind behind the crime, Melinda Loveless, was jealous that her ex-girlfriend had started seeing Shanda after their breakup. The 15-year-old mastermind was aided by girls whose ages ranged from 15 to 17. The crime was particularly gruesome, with investigators noting Shanda's injuries were extreme. Melinda and the other girls had tortured Shanda all throughout the night before delivering several blows that finally unalived her. At the end of the crime, Melinda even went back to her ex-girlfriend the next day to tell her that Shanda will not be a problem anymore. Two of the girls and the ex-girlfriend later went ahead and told the police everything. They uncovered Shanda's remains, and the case began. Melinda's family claimed that she was far too young to understand what she had done. Plus, she came from a horrific family background, and that contributed to her mental distress. The judge noted that the unalivers were all minors, but that was not enough to distract him from the fact that the teenagers carefully thought out this crime and that Shanda was an innocent victim throughout it all. The court sentenced the girls to 60 years in confinement for the horrific crime. Melina was eventually released. Cindy Collier and Shirley Wolfe. Cindy Collier and Shirley Wolfe. In 1983, 14-year-old Shirley Wolfe and 15-year-old Cindy Collier stabbed 85-year-old Anna Brackett, seemingly for the thrill of it. The pair had only just met that day and, according to reports, lied to Brackett to get inside her home, telling her they needed to use her phone. Once inside, they waited and attacked her with a knife before fleeing the scene. Investigators quickly tracked them down. Neighbors had seen two teenage girls running from the area, and both girls were arrested that night. During police interviews, Shirley's diary entries were later cited as chilling evidence. One famously read, "Today, Cindy and I ran away and unalived an old lady. It was lots of fun." Both were tried as juveniles and convicted of the crime in Placer County. Cindy was sent to a youth authority facility, where she spent around 9 years before being paroled in 1992, later earning a college degree and reportedly living a law-abiding life. Shirley served a longer stint, later being released after more than a decade behind bars. Jamarion Lawhorn. In October 2014, 12-year-old Jamarion Lawhorn shocked the Michigan community when he unalived 12-year-old Connor on a playground in Detroit. The two children did not know each other. According to investigators, Jamarion had gone to the park with a kitchen knife hidden in his sleeve. Without warning, he attacked Connor, stabbing him multiple times before calmly walking away. He later passed away from her injuries at the hospital. When police arrested Jamarion, many were stunned by how young he was. Prosecutors initially charged him as an adult with first-degree murder, a move that sparked debate. His defense argued that he had endured severe physical harm at home and was suffering from untreated trauma and mental health struggles. They claimed he was a child shaped by violence, not a hardened criminal. In 2016, Jamarion accepted a plea deal, admitting to second-degree murder. He was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years and a maximum of 60 years in prison, meaning he will not be eligible for release until his late 30s at the earliest. But by 2021, it was reported that Jamarion was scheduled for an early release, a move supported by Connor's family. Eric Smith. Eric Smith was locked up for 27 years, starting from 1993 when he was 13. What crime did a 13-year-old commit? Well, in 1993, Eric abducted 4-year-old Derek Robbie while he was on his way back from camp. He then took him to the nearby woods in Savona, New York, where he dropped a rock on Derek's head, unaliving him. 4 days later, Eric admitted to his mother that he had unalived the child. She immediately turned him over to the police, and they charged Eric. The courtroom was in shock when Eric walked in, nerdy with big glasses and freckles, and he had just committed a crime that shook the entire state. His defense brought in a psychiatrist who testified that Eric had mental challenges. The prosecution just presented the evidence in the case. The jury agreed Eric was a danger to society who had planned on committing the crime and was likely to become a repeat offender. They agreed to a life term, but ultimately released Eric after 27 years. Jordan Brown. In February of 2009, Kenzie Marie Hoke was found unalived in the New Beaver, Pennsylvania home she shared with her fiancé, 2 daughters, and stepson. She had been shot in the back of the head while she was sleeping, instantly unaliving her and her unborn child. The body was discovered by Kenzie's 4-year-old daughter after her other daughter and stepson went to school. When investigators arrived at the scene, they believed that the shooting had occurred using a hunting shotgun. Later, they found the shell casing on the same route Kenzie's 11-year-old stepson, Jordan Brown, took when going to school. This raised suspicion, and the police charged Jordan with unaliving his stepmother. Jordan's father and Kenzie's fiancé opposed the charge, pointing out that Kenzie's ex-boyfriend had previously threatened to unalive her. The defense tried to play that out, but the prosecution claimed that Jordan was scared he would be replaced in the family eventually, especially with Kenzie giving birth soon. The judge believed the prosecution's narrative, and Jordan, at 11, was sentenced to a life term without parole. However, just 3 years into his sentence, the defense team brought forward more evidence that cast doubt on his involvement. His acquittal was controversial because many people, including Kenzie's family members, believed that he had unalived her. Still, by 2018, Jordan Brown was acquitted and released. Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris. On April 20th, 1999, Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris, both 17 years old, carried out one of the most infamous school attacks in American history at Columbine High School in Colorado. The two seniors had spent months planning the assault, gathering weapons, building explosives, and documenting their hatred in journals and home videos later referred to as the basement tapes. That morning, they arrived at school armed with guns and homemade bombs. Their original plan was to detonate large explosives in the cafeteria during lunch hour, but when the bombs failed to go off, they began shooting instead. In less than an hour, 12 students and 1 teacher were unalived. Dozens more were injured. The attack ended when Dylan and Eric turned their weapons on themselves inside the school library. In the aftermath, investigators uncovered writings filled with rage, superiority, fantasies, and a desire to outdo previous mass attacks. The prosecution never had the chance to try them in court, but lawsuits followed, and the case reshaped how schools handle security, bullying reports, and threat assessments. Joshua Phillips. 14-year-old Joshua Phillips claimed that he unalived his neighbor, 8-year-old Madeline, out of fear. He claimed that while the two of them were playing outside in Jacksonville, Florida, Joshua accidentally hit Madeline in the eye with a baseball. He claimed he took her home, where he tried to get her to stop crying, but she would not. She also told Joshua that she would be telling her parents. This frightened Joshua, who came from an unsteady home, with a father who had repeatedly hurt him throughout his childhood. Joshua claimed that he did what he thought was best and tried to unalive Madeline to keep her from telling anyone. It was not until a week later that his mother found Madeline's body beneath his bed in his bedroom. Joshua was arrested at school and admitted to everything. His defense portrayed him as someone going through distress, and fear had taken over him. The prosecution pointed out a few things. Madeline was not unalived immediately, and Joshua actually came back to finish the deed. He had participated in the search party that went out looking for her. He had also hidden her body for a week, and that at any point he could have made any other decision besides unaliving an 8-year-old girl. Joshua was ultimately sentenced to life without parole, while was overturned to life with parole. But since 1998, Joshua has been locked up. Daniel Marsh. On the night of April 14th, Daniel Marsh left his mother's home in the early morning hours and wandered the streets looking for victims. He eventually found Oliver Northup Jr. and Claudia Maupin asleep in their condo just 2 doors down. Daniel broke in through a window, silently watched the couple sleep, and then repeatedly stabbed both of them, inflicting over 128 stab wounds between the two of them. After unaliving them, he later mutilated their bodies. He wore all black gloves and taped his shoes to avoid leaving prints. He later bragged about the crime to friends and confessed to the police when confronted. During interrogation, Daniel described the act with disturbing calm and said the crimes gave him pure happiness. Charged as an adult, Daniel was convicted in September of 2 counts of first-degree murder with special circumstances, including torture and lying in wait. He was declared sane by the jury and sentenced to 52 years to life in prison, meaning he must serve at least 25 years before parole eligibility. Nicholas Lindsay. School teachers believed Nicholas Lindsay was a great kid. Polite and well-mannered, they would do anything to be well-liked. However, his Facebook profile showed a completely different side of him. He was reportedly part of a gang, made threats online, and had some prior non-violent offenses. Things came to a head in 2011, when Officer David Crawford responded to a call, reporting a man holding a brick and jumping through fences. When he arrived at the scene, he was shot at close range by Nicholas. It took the police less than 24 hours to find 16-year-old Nicholas, who confessed immediately. Apparently, his mother had realized he was the perpetrator and told him to confess. In court, Nicholas was tried as an adult and indicted by a grand jury that found him guilty of unaliving a police officer. His defense argued that he was a scared kid who grew up around the wrong influences, but the prosecution claimed that he had shot Crawford 5 times at close range. The jury found Nicholas guilty and sentenced him to a life term without parole. Will Cornick. The unaliving of 61-year-old Spanish teacher, Anne Maguire, was a crime that shocked the Leeds community. But what made the crime even more shocking was the fact that the perpetrator was her 15-year-old student, Will Cornick. Will was apparently at odds with Anne and had even posted online ads to hire someone to unalive her. Finally, in 2014, he began stabbing Anne in the middle of class, getting 7 stabs in before another teacher rushed to her aid. Will even brought a bottle of whiskey to celebrate. Anne would later pass away from her injuries, and Will was arrested and charged almost immediately. His defense said it was clearly a mental breakdown, but according to Will's psychiatrists, he had confessed to the crime 4 days earlier, saying that he was going to make it happen one way or another. This was reviewed by the judge, who then sentenced Will to a life term behind bars. The case of Angela Wrightson. On the night of December 8, 2014, 13 and 14-year-old girls in Hartlepool, England, decided to visit the home of 39-year-old Angela Wrightson, a vulnerable woman known locally for giving underage kids alcohol. The girls arrived at her flat, asking her to buy alcohol and cigarettes for them. CCTV caught Wrightson returning with cider shortly before the attack began. Over the next 5 to 7 hours, the teenagers beat her repeatedly with household objects, including a shovel, a wooden baton driven with screws, and even a CRT television. At one point, one of the girls posted a Snapchat selfie showing Angela with injuries, almost as if it were a joke. They paused the assault only to return later and continue inflicting harm, leaving her severely beaten and unconscious. In the early hours of December 9th, the girls left and even called the police twice for a ride home. Wrightson's body, later found by her landlord, showed over 100 injuries, most to her head. Both teens were arrested that same day. During the trial, they denied unaliving, but a Leeds Crown Court jury ultimately found them guilty, and in April 2016, they were each handed minimum terms of 15 years imprisonment.